and just welcome everyone. And we'll start, of course, with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So
Amen.
only because,
Amen.
thank you, only because I thought this was an exciting discovery, quote, okay? I may be sharing something with you that I've already shared with you and you already remember, so forgive me if this is repetitious to you. But that phrase, Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav, who has made us holy through his commandments, right? Or has sanctified us through his commandments. So many years ago, my liturgy professor, Dr. Pedachovsky, translated Kitshanu, holiness, as special, because it's very difficult. I think, at least certainly I'm speaking for myself, exactly what was meant by holy or sanctified wasn't really clear to me as to what its denotation was. And he explained that it meant special. So for years and years and years, I just sort of understood holiness, kadosh, as being a category of being unique, special, etc. And lately, more lately, say within the last month or two, it occurred to me, since my understanding of religion is that it's all about trying to give us significance, try to help us discover how to live lives that one might call significant, to translate the word kadosh as significant. So now the phrase Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav starts to make, for me anyway, a lot more sense, because who has made us significant through his commandments. That it really, to my mind, gives the whole gravitas of performing commandments, that we aren't just living for ourselves, but that in performing commandments, we are linking ourselves to something just far more profound and far more significant. And because we ourselves are capable of performing those commandments, which involves a willingness to sacrifice the ego and to try and hopefully put things into this world that add to its beauty, etc., and its loveliness, that really starts to give you the idea of Asher Kitshanu B'mitzvotav, and how precious it is that we have mitzvot to allow us to develop a sense of significance. So if I'm repetitious, I apologize. If I'm not repetitious, I hope you found that interesting. So we're just sort of finishing up this last sentence of the first aliyah. The first aliyot in Tavo are pretty brief, because once we get to, I think it's like the sixth aliyah, which actually lists all the curses, we want to sort of get them all done in one aliyah, not try to spread them out too much. So that's a long aliyah. So here we are, v'samachta b'chol hatov, and you shall rejoice, you shall be happy in all the goodness, asher natan lecha Hashem Elokecha, which Hashem Elokecha, the Lord your God, has given you, uleveitecha, and to your household. Ata, you, v'halevi, and the Levite, v'hager, and the stranger, right, the non-Israelite, asher b'kirbecha, who are in your midst. I mentioned yesterday, I believe, that the word tov has the connotation of completeness. So here we go with the Rashi. V'samachta b'chol hatov. So from tractate or Bikurim, chapter 3, Mikan, from here Amru, that they said, Ein korin mikra bikurim. You do not recite this recitation over the bikurim, ela bisman simcha, except at a time of joy. Hainu, and that is to say, me atzeret. Atzeret is a rabbinic term for Shavuot. So from Shavuot, the Ad HaChag, and HaChag, the festival, refers to Sukkot. So from Shavuot, which is the beginnings of summertime, until Sukkot, which is the fall, comes in the fall. That is the time when you declare Bikurim. She'adam, why? Because a person, an individual, milaket tfuato, collects, gathers his produce, tfuato, uferotav, and his fruits, veyeno, and his wine, veshamno, and his oil, aval mehachag va'elech, but from Sukkot and onwards, he may bring his bikurim, ve'eno koreh, but he does not make the declaration, he does not recite it. So Rashi's giving us a little taste of, halachic analysis in terms of trying to take the words of this Torah and make it practical and looking at all the practical ramifications of it. Ata v'halevi, you and the Levite. Af halevi, chayav bebikurim. So if you look at the sentence, right, and meditate a little bit, it's suggesting to you that even the Levite is obligated to bring bikurim, im not o betoch arehem. If he has planted anything, right, well, one of the 5 species, right? The 7 species, one of the 7 species. If he planted it within their cities, right? So they had their cities and they would have had gardens, they wouldn't have had land. So the mention of this Levi here specifically, because let's be honest about it, we might not have thought that the Levi was supposed to bring Bikurim because he doesn't get the same kind of allotment that the rest of the tribes got. So this is telling us, no, in fact, he does. V'hager asher bekibecha. So notice how they are linking who is in your midst, referring to Hager, the non-Israelite, right? And again in the tractate Bikurim, and also in Makot Yutet, the tractate Makot, Mevi, he brings ve'eno koreh, but he does not make the declaration. He doesn't make the recitation. Why? Because she'eno yachol lomar la'avotenu, because he cannot talk about his ancestors, right? They're not Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's precisely why he is considered a non-Israelite. So as I was sharing this with you, of course, I was thinking, well, what about an Ishmaelite, right? Or etc. But the point is, not all their ancestors are included, because of course, if Jacob is your patriarch, if Jacob is included, he's Israel, and that's why you can say all our patriarchs and you're an Israelite. But the other 2 categories only include either Abraham alone or Abraham and Isaac. So, but it's interesting. I mean, there is a connection nevertheless, and I think that's significant, even though sad to say there was so much hatred over the centuries and abuse. So, on to the second aliyah. Ki tichale la'aser et kol ma'aser tfu'atcha. Okay, so when you complete tichale, when you end, when you complete, to tithe all the tithe, all of your produce, Bashana Hashlishit, in the 3rd year, Shnat Hamaser, of the year of tithing, Venatata lalevi velager layatom, you shall give it to the Levite, we'll say the non-Israelite, layatom, to the orphan, vela almana, and to the widow, va'achlu b'sha'arecha, and they shall eat it within your gates, v'saveu, and they shall be satiated. They shall have as much as they want, to a point of satiation. Lots of Rashi here. Okay, so this gets into the a system of, you might say, taxation, right? The tithing. So let's take a look. Ki techalel la'aser et kol ma'aser tfuratcha. So he's quoting the entire, or a good part of the verse, right? When you complete, right, to tithe all the tithe of your produce, bashana hashlishit, in the third year. So now he's going to try and explain to us what exactly this Hebrew is meaning. Keshetigmor lahafrish ma'asrot. When you complete, when you're finished separating off the tithes, shel shana hashlishit, of the third year. Kvazman habiur, okay, you shall establish the time of the removal, right? This is, I believe, biur refers to the removal of anything that isn't tithed, that's supposed to be tithed, right? All has to be removed. Vahavidui, and the declaration, the Erev HaPesach, on the eve of Pesach, Shel Shna HaRevi'it, by the eve of Pesach of the fourth year. Shene'emar, as it states, so in another place, it says in Deuteronomy 14, Miktseh Shalosh Shanim Totzi. So that's a devref, this at the end, Miktseh Shalosh Shanim, at the end of 3 years, you shall take out, etc. So that's a section that speaks specifically about this mitzvah of biur, of removal. Ne'emar kan.
Can I?
Yes, please. If you have a different translation. Yeah, please.
Well, slightly, yeah. For one thing, the first, because there were a few discrepancies, but the first thing, it says that it fixes a time for the removal, but then in parentheses it says of the tithes from the house.
Right.
Okay, because I thought you said for the things that weren't being.
I did.
Then
what I meant, okay, Lauren, if I can just interrupt a second and say, yes, it was not, what I said was not clear. What I was trying to say is things that were supposed to be tithed. In other words, the stuff that you had tithed, so you now had the tithes and had not removed them yet. Right. In other words, it was ever tithes that were left over that had not yet been removed. But it wasn't clear. I was not clear. And I really appreciate you're using that to clarify it. Thank you. Yes, please go. Keep going.
The next thing, it instead of declaration, it uses the word confession, which I find an interesting substitute. I wasn't sure that this was necessarily correct. Generally, when you translate something, I think you translate it correctly, and sometimes Chabad is spinning it a little bit. But I'm just letting you know it says confession here.
Okay.
And then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say,
ahead.
Okay, so if we went back to Deuteronomy 14, right, there's a statement there that a person is supposed to make that says that he has removed all his things, okay? So my understanding of a confession is more of admitting guilt of some kind, right? That's my understanding of the word confession. If somebody wants to go back, or I can try and go back, take the time to go back to Deuteronomy 14. I'd need to get a book because I'd have to scroll back here to get to it. Although we could go to Sefaria. If you want to go to Sefaria and check out Deuteronomy 14, I think it's worth taking the time. I can quickly try and see if I can find my Sefaria.
And I also suppose that confession can be synonymous with declaration too.
Yeah.
To confess is to come up with something, and to declare it.
Right. I know. It just seems to me. So what did I say? Deuteronomy 14? Let me see if I can find it quickly.
It says here Deuteronomy 14:28 is the quote about the 3 years.
Okay, here we go. Okay, let me see what I can find. Okay, so this is what it says in Deuteronomy 14. I'll just read the English. Every third year, you shall bring out the full tithe of your field of that year, but leave it within your settlements. So we're getting an explanation as to what happens there. Oops, sorry. Just having issues here with the size of the screen. Okay, let me keep, okay, just make sure I could scroll. Okay. Then the Levite who has no hereditary portion as you have, and the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow in your settlements can come and eat their fill, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all your enterprises you undertake. Okay, let's go see if there's a place where it says, let's see, maybe, okay. So Deuteronomy 14 talks a lot about, especially starting with verse 22, it talks about that tithing every year. Okay, so I was just trying to see. So I must be, I can't think of the place where there's this beautiful statement. Maybe it's actually, one second, it may actually be in our own Parsha. Let me see. Yes. Look on, if you look on at verse 13, you'll see that there's a declaration there. Okay, and I imagine that's the confession they're talking about. But I'll keep going on with the Rashi right now in the little time that we have. Okay, all right. Was there another point you wanted to make, Lauren? I know we were talking about that one. Was there something else?
The only other thing is it said when you, after the confession declaration, it said in the afternoon of the last day of Passover of the 4th year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It says the afternoon of the last day of Pesach?
That's of the 4th year, yeah. And then it says at the end of 3 years, you shall take out all the tithe of your crop, and later on scripture also uses.
Right, that's the next Rashi. But look here, I'm pointing to it, okay? It says Be'erev HaPesach. Erev HaPesach isn't the last day of Pesach. At least that's never been my understanding of Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach is the evening, the day before Pesach.
It's in the notes. It's in the parentheses.
Yes. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Huh. All right. Okay. All right. Well, let's keep going and see what we can do here. Let me do this. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. I want to find it. Okay. So in this passage, right, the passage in front of us, and in Deuteronomy 14, it says Miketz. Kan Miketz v'ne'emar lahalan Miketz. And in that other place, it also uses the term Miketz. So you know Miketz Sheva Shanim. Le'inyan hakhel. That has to do, I believe hakhel means gathering together. It's the mitzvah of people all coming together. Okay? If you have anything different in your translation, Lauren, let me know. Ma lahalan regel. Just as there, it's referring to a pilgrim festival. Afkan regel. So here too, it's referring to a pilgrim festival. Ima lahalan Chag HaSukkot, and just as there, it's talking about Chag HaSukkot, Afkan Chag HaSukkot. So here, even though it doesn't say it explicitly, okay, the regel they must be referring to is Chag HaSukkot. Okay, Talmud Lomar. So that would be the deduction. So this is Talmud Lomar. So for this reason, Scripture teaches ki techale la'aser. It says when you complete tithing, right? When you complete the process of tithing, ma'asrot shel shana hashlishit, the tithes of the 3rd year. So that's a reference to regel sheha ma'asrot kalin bo. This is the pilgrim festival where the tithes, in other words, the tithes of that year end. In other words, whatever produce is tithed, the last time that the tithe of that year has to be before Pesach. Anything you tithe after Pesach then is for the next year's tithes. In other words, it's a cutoff point in terms of what year's tithes we're talking about. V'zehu Pesach, and this refers to Pesach. Sheharbe ilanot. Why? There are many trees. Yesh, there are many trees. Shenilkatin achar hasukot, that in fact are gathered or harvested after Sukkot. Nimtza'u, and consequently you will find ma'asrut shel shelit. This is why the tithes of the 3rd year and kalin bepesach shel revi'it, and the Pesach of the fourth year. So even though it's the fourth year, okay, nevertheless, since it's after Sukkot, right, and you're going to move into that fourth year, it's still going to count for the third year. V'chol mi sheshaha ma'asrotav, and anyone who delayed in bringing his tithes, hitzrichu hakatuv leva'aro min habayit. So now Rashi's explained how you might wind up after Pesach having to remove tithes of the previous year. It says, so literally it means scripture, hakatuv, scripture, hitzrichu, has made it necessary, has forced him, leva'aro min habayit, to remove them from his house. Shnat hamaser, so the year of the tithe. Shana, right? So he's saying, what do we mean by this? Shana she'ein nohig ba ela ma'asar echad. Okay, so he's saying, because it says ma'aser, and I need to give you a little bit of background here. There were two tithes so in the 7-year cycle, 6 of those years, the first 6 of the 7-year cycle, there were tithes taken. There were no tithes in the 7th year because the land became ownerless. So there was nothing to tithe from in terms of the fields, because the land was for that year considered ownerless. So in the first 3 and the second 3 years, okay, there were 2 tithes taken. The first tithe would go to the Levites. That's Masar Rishon. That would go to the Levites, okay? And the second tithe, which was 10% of the remainder, okay, was a remainder, that was the tithe, we read about it, that would be taken up to Jerusalem, okay? And I think we talked about that. So that was the second tithe. That operated in years 1 and 2, and in years 4 and 5. So what about the third year? And so in the third year, since that second tithe wasn't operating, that is what Rashi is referring to when he says the year when there is no practice except 1 tithe, because every year of those 6 years, you always gave that first tithe to the Levite. But in the 3rd and 6th year, you did not take those crops, the second tithe, the crops of the second tithe, up to Jerusalem. Okay, you didn't do that. So that's why it's referring to, okay, so only one of the tithes, mishnei ma'asarot, of the 2 tithes, shena'agu bishnei shanim shelefanea, that operated in the 2 years that preceded that 3rd year. Sheshana rishona ushniya, because in the 1st and 2nd years, shel shmita, of the shmita cycle, okay, noheg bahem, we have the practice ma'asar rishon, of ma'asar rishon, that first tithe, kamor shekatuv, as is written in Numbers 19, ki tikhu me'et bnei Yisrael et hama'aser, when you take from the children of Israel the tithe. So that was 1 tithe that was given to the Levites, as I said. Umasar sheni, and the second tithe, shene'emar, as is stated above chapter 14, ve'echalta lifnei Hashem Elokecha, you shall consume it before the Lord your God. Ma'aser, and it goes on to say, the tithe of your degancha, your wheat, your tiroshcha, which would be your wine, your grapes, the yitzharcha, and your olives, your oil. Harei shtei ma'asarot. And so now we wind up with 2 tithes. Uva limidcha kan, and it comes and teaches you here, bashana hashlishit, that in the 3rd year, she'ein noheg me'otan shtei ma'asarot, where there's 2 tithes, where those 2 tithes do not operate. Ela ha'echad, only one of them, the ezo zeh Ma'asar Rishon. And what tithe are we talking about? We're talking about Ma'asar Rishon, the tithe that you would give to the Levites, the first tithe, the Tachat Ma'asar Sheni, and in the place of the Ma'asar Sheni, the second tithe, Yitain Ma'asar Oni. He should give the poor person's tithe. There's a second tithe regardless, but it isn't treated like the second tithe of the other years. This is given to the poor. Shene'emar kan, as it states here, v'natata lalevi, you shall give it to the Levite, et asher lo, that which is his, hare ma'asar rishon. So the Levite refers to the first tithe, and then when it goes on to say lagir layatom v'la almana, to the to the non-Jew, to the orphan and the widow, ze ma'asar oni. That is the poor person's tithe. So let's take that. Let's continue with God's help tomorrow.
Yeah, there's one more little Rashi
I
for
know,
that.
but I don't want to do it now because I'm so short of time.
That's true, you are.
And I'll see if I can pop it in here. Okay. And there we are. I'm going to stop the share. And I'm going to stop the, and thank those who have joined us to this point. Thank you very much.